As I told you, we will work on the topics starting from topic 1 to topic 21. Today, we need to work on topic 1, which is characteristics and classification of living organisms. So let's start by checking the objectives of the first part. Then we will go through the parts of this topic. The first part of topic 1 related to the main characteristics of living things. In order to decide if we have living organism or not, this living organism or this organism that we want to check should have 7 characteristics. 7 characteristics, and we call this Mrs. Grin because we took the first letter of each characteristics and we combine it in order to remind you what are the 7 characteristics. The first one, and I cannot say it is one of the characteristics, but all biologists around the world said that in order to say that we have living organism or not, the living organisms should made up of cells. So we cannot consider this as one of the main characteristics. So, but definitely, a cell is the basic unit of structure and function for all living organisms. We cannot talk about any organism, is it living or non-living, unless we realize that this organism is made up of cells. The first characteristic of life is nutrition. And if I ask you, what is nutrition? Nutrition simply is the taking in of materials for all of the metabolic activities, all of the energy release process, growth, development. So nutrition found in all living organisms. The question now is, how do plants and animals carry out nutrition? So we can say plants take in raw material to make their own food by photosynthesis process. On the other side, animals feed on plants and other animals. Animals exert an effort to catch and eat food in order to take all of the requirements, energy requirements needed for all their daily life activities. So I think after studying this slide, you realize that nutrition is a common characteristic between animals and plants. The second one is respiration. There is a huge difference between nutrition and respiration, because in the exam, if I asked you to define nutrition, you should say taking in all of the nutrients needed for all of the activities for the living organism, such as energy release, growth, and development. But if I asked you about respiration, respiration is a chemical reaction in the body. It is a process of breaking down nutrients or all of the nutrient molecules in cells to release energy for metabolism. So what is metabolism? Nice to understand what's metabolism. Look, all of the chemical reactions happened in the body called metabolism. So metabolism such as growth, for example, it is a chemical process and it requires energy. Excretion is the third feature or the third characteristic of life. Excretion is the removal of metabolic waste products and substances in excess of the body requirements. So as a result of metabolism, as a result of this kind of activity in the body, there are some waste products, and all of the waste products should be removed from the body. So excretion is one of the features of the of life or of all living organisms. Excretion is unrelated to kidney and urination process only. Humans excrete carbon dioxide from the body through their lungs. Plants also excrete oxygen produced during photosynthesis process. That's why we named oxygen as a byproduct, a second product or secondary product from photosynthesis, and this is the excretion. So now we mentioned nutrition, respiration, excretion. The fourth characteristic is growth and development. What is the definition of growth? Growth is the permanent increase in dry mass and size, or you can say increase in mass and size of an organism. Please don't forget to study all of the definitions because you might find one of them in your exam. For growth, we need to understand this process happened and uses energy. Energy comes from food. So food is converted into living matter, and by the end of topic 7, you will understand that this process called assimilation. And we will talk about this later when we already worked on this topic. So the new matter is used to growth or for growth and repair, and all of the cells will be added to original living matter. For development, this is a process of development in the life cycle in one of the living organism. So how to make an organism more complex, how to change the simplicity into complexity of an organism, how to change an organism from phase to another phase in the life cycle. This is called development of an organism. If we want to study the body of the caterpillar, you will find that the first phase is the egg phase. And then the egg phase change to the larvae, which is the caterpillar, and it eats a lot of leaves and grow very quickly or rapidly. There is a fast rate of growing. Then it will be changed into pupa, and this is honestly, this is an amazing change, because after this phase, it will be changed to an adult butterfly. So we can say that the caterpillar has been developed into pupa and adult butterfly. Another characteristic, which is number 5, movement. If I asked you guys simply, what's movement? Movement is an action by an organism causing change either in place or position. So movement is one of the characteristics that we can share among all living organisms. So the movement, for example, of some animals, the movement of plants, the movement of plants towards specific stimuli, all of this considered as a kind of movement. The sixth characteristics is reproduction. And if I asked any one of you simply, he will say, reproduction is the process by which we are making same kind of organisms. So reproduction is extremely important to keep a species in the system or in the ecosystem generally. Sensitivity. Sensitivity is the ability of an organism to detect and respond to change in the external or internal environment. Very important to say detects and respond in your definition. For those verbs, you will take the mark of the definition, the ability of an organism to detect, because some students say, sir, we know well what is sensitivity, but we cannot express. We know well what is the sensitivity definition, but how could we write this in front of you now? How could you take the 2 marks for a definition of sensitivity? And in front of you, a lot of examples for detect and respond to some changes. Any change that your body is responding to, called the stimulus or stimuli, singular and plural, guys. So simply in front of you, a lot of stimulus, and you have to mention that your body will detect and respond to all these changes. Now we have covered the first part. Please don't forget Mrs. Grimm, because this will help you to memorize everything. Movement, respiration, sensitivity, growth, reproduction, excretion, and nutrition. So simply, if you know well what's Mrs. Grimm, you have covered the first part. The second part is related to the classification of living organisms. So in front of each objective, the word S, or the letter S represents that this part is extended. Extended part, it means you will study it in year 10 or year 11. It's unrelated to the core course. Okay, so this is our part now. If I asked you, how is classification useful? Classification definitely useful because it will provide you a lot of information, and it will provide you an information about the features of living things and the evolutionary relationships among organisms. So look, if we studied the if you study the skeletons of different living organisms, you will find definitely there is a common arrangement, or they have similar arrangement with definitely respect to the dimensions and the thickness of the bone and the shape of the body, but we have same arrangement. Okay, so classification will give you a clear idea about the ancestors and how some living organisms have common ancestors and evolutionary relationships among organisms. If I asked you, how do we classify things? I want you to focus on this. If I asked you at home, how do you classify your stuff in your room? You will definitely say, sir, we will put shoes together in specific area. We will put all our pants in a specific area, our tops, our t-shirts in another area, our sweatpants in specific row, and so on. Why? Because this definitely will help you to organize everything, to deal with everything, to know if you are a bit late, how could you take all of your stuff from different area that you know well. And honestly, this is the same for classification. Classification to facilitate, or this classification system used to facilitate studying of all living organisms, to study the characteristics, to study the main features, to study the differences. This will help you definitely based on similarities and differences. Living organisms are classified according to specific hierarchy. Starts with kingdom, then phylum, then each phylum made up of several classes, then each class made up of orders, then family, then genus, and finally species. Honestly, all what I want you to know is genus and species, because this is called binomial system. What's binomial system? This is a system has been created by Carlos Linnaeus, and he said I will give every single organism two names. The first name starts with an uppercase letter, and this is the genus name. And the second name is the species name, and it starts with a lowercase letter. So, for example, here we have two types or two species of penguins. They have same genus, but different species. So we can say that we have two different species of penguin because they have different second name, but the first name for both are exactly the same. And by the way, there is no need to pronounce the name because you might find in the exam a lot of complicated name. All what you need is to understand that the first name is the genus name and the second name is the species name. Another organism, and as I'm telling you, the first name is the genus name and the second name is the species name. Okay, both genus and species names are either italics or should be underlined. In the exam, he will ask you to pick from the multiple choice, for example, the correct name for a specific organism, or he will ask you for two living organisms. They are from the same species or same genus, and you have to select based on what you understand in binomial system of naming species. Okay, let's go through the 5 kingdoms to understand what are the basic kingdoms that you have to know about. If you are year 9 students, you need to know Kingdom Animalia and Kingdom Plantae only. If you are year 10 or 11, you need to know the basic idea about each kingdom. Let's start from the prokaryote or the bacterial kingdom. Bacteria in a kingdom called prokaryotes. Prokaryotes include bacteria and some unicellular organism, okay, or blue-green algae, okay? So bacteria are unicellular. Bacteria, and please focus, all what I'm saying are the characteristic that he might ask you in paper 4 about. So bacteria, unicellular. Bacteria have specific circular DNA. They have a cell wall, but this cell wall made of murine, and it's another type of carbohydrates different than the cell wall of plants. They have no nucleus at all, and they have no membrane-bound structure. So bacteria, any kind of bacteria, spherical bacteria, rod-shaped bacteria, spiral bacteria, any kind of bacteria considered as an example of prokaryotes. The second kingdom called Protoctista or Protoctests. Protoctests are aquatic, or I can say most of them are aquatic. They are unicellular organisms, but some of them are multicellular because, you know, as we are going from a simple group to the most complex or the advanced level, there should be some complexity. So it's not all unicellular, but some of them are multicellular organisms. They have nucleus, they have membrane-bound structure, and when I'm saying membrane-bound structure, I mean they have some organelles performing a certain function in the cell. They have cell wall, and some of them have chlorophyll. So some of them have chlorophyll, and when I'm saying chlorophyll or green pigments, this means that photosynthesis process will occur. The third kingdom is kingdom fungi, and this kingdom characterized by multicellular organisms. Some of them are unicellular, but the majority now are multicellular organisms. They have cells with a nucleus, and they have cell wall made up of chitin. Some teachers pronounce it chitin, chitin, or chitin. For me, it's chitin. That's what I learned from my doctors. However, they don't have chlorophyll at all. So we cannot consider them as plants because they have no chlorophyll and they feed on some decaying matter. So they feed on something. They cannot make their own food. Plantae or kingdom plants. Starting from here, kingdom plants are multicellular, and I think it's easy to write or mention some characteristics of the living organisms belongs to this kingdom because plants around us. So organisms have a cell wall with a nucleus, a cell wall made of cellulose and a large central vacuole. And we will talk in details about the structure or typical structure of plants. They contain chlorophyll to make food by photosynthesis process. I will talk about the classification of kingdom Plantae in the next couple of slides, but I want to give you the general idea about the kingdoms. Kingdom Animalia, I think if I asked you to list the characteristics of your body, of my body, of some animal's body, you can say all of the animals have cells with a nucleus, membrane-bound organelle, and they obtain energy by feeding on other organisms. Animals are classified into two major groups, arthropods or invertebrates and vertebrates. Let's go through different slides in order to understand the kingdoms and what I want you to know about kingdom Plantae and kingdom Animalia specifically. Oh, I did not talk about viruses at all because viruses consists of genetic material coated by a protein coat. So we cannot consider viruses as a living organism, although it reproduces inside the main host cells. So it has a genetic material, but because as agreed, it made up of a protein crystal, a protein coat, and the genetic material inside, we cannot consider viruses as a living organism. And that's what I said in the presentation in front of you. For plants, how do we classify plants? We classify plants into ferns and flowering plants. Flowering plants from the name flower, so it's made up of root, stem, leaves, and it produces flowers and seeds, and the reproduction process happened by different types of seeds. Flowering plants classified into monocot and dicot plants. Monocot plants with one cotyledons in the seeds. This is like one coat, okay? And the seeds, like the maize seed, like rice, all of these types of seeds considered as sugarcane, for example, all of those types of seeds are example of monocot plants. And the very important to know the characteristics, guys. I have 4 characteristics you have to know about plants. Monocot has one cotyledon. Monocot plants has parallel veins like this. Monocot plants has they have all fibrous roots like this structure. It has a lot of fibrous or tissues, or they have fibrous root. For the flower of those monocot plants, they have a flower made up of, or petals made up of 3s or multiple of 3s. So 3, 6, 9, and so on. So if you have a flower in between your hands and you want to count the number of petals when you found them, 3 or multiple of 3s, This means that you have monocot plant. For dicot plants, you have two cotyledons, like the cotyledons of bean seed or pea plants or lentil seed. All of these are example of dicot plants, and the leaf is large, has large surface area with a lot of branched venation, like this one. We have a lot of branched venation. For the root, it has tap roots, and it's like major part of the root to anchor the plant on the soil. And for the flower of this plant made up of 4 or 5 and multiple of 4 or 5 petals. So you can definitely predict if you have monocot plant or dicot plant from the shape of the flower. Okay. Another classification or another part for ferns. Ferns have main features. They have roots, stem, and leaves, but they don't produce flowers or seeds at all. They reproduce by specific spores, and the spores found here in rows like this. All of these are ferns, spores, and those spores form fronds like this. That's it for ferns. There is no need to mention anything else. Okay, for the classification of animals, look, those are the groups of arthropods that you have to understand and then memorize. And for me, even when I studied this part, I tried to keep one example in my mind. That's why I can memorize all of the characteristics. Arthropods groups has no backbone. Arthropods named as invertebrates. Arthropods have segmented body, jointed legs. All of the legs are like that. Jointed, okay, it has specific joints here. Okay, those are the shape of the legs, and the body covered with exoskeleton. The exoskeleton is an outer covering, hard, rigid, and this exoskeleton made of chitin. In front of you, the characteristics of each group: crustaceans, myriapods, arachnids, and insects. Very important to differentiate between the 4 types. I will keep this slide in front of you just to memorize some basics or to list some characteristics. The most frequent question about arthropods is a question related to the arachnids and another question related to insects, but I cannot say that you will not find any question related to crustaceans and myriapods. The majority of the questions to differentiate between insects and arachnids, but very important to memorize all of the characteristics for the 4 groups. Crustaceans such as shrimp, lobster, and crab, they are mainly aquatic. They have gills. They have 2 pairs of feelers called antennae, and most of them have compound eyes. For millipedes or myriapods, they have many legs and 1 or 2 pairs of legs in each body segments. As you can see, a lot of segments here. A lot of segments, body segments here, and they have simple eyes. For scorpion or the arachnids characteristics, such as a spider, tick, scorpion, they have a body divided into cephalothorax and abdomen. Cephalothorax is the head and thorax together with an abdomen. They have 4 pairs of legs They have no antenna and simple eyes. Last group in arthropods, the insects group, and you can put any insects belong this group or under this classification. They have they have 3 pairs of legs, and please don't be confused. 4 pairs of legs for arachnids and 3 pairs of legs for insects. They might have 2 pairs of wings. Usually they have wings, and they have 1 pair of antennae. Most of them have compound eyes. For vertebrates, there is no need to talk about the characteristics of vertebrates. I will keep the slide in front of you just to take a look on all of the characteristics for fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. For fish, very important to talk about gills and most lay eggs. All of the other characteristics already in front of you. For amphibians, very important to remember that they have moist skin and they have life cycle starts in water, and then part of it will be on land. For reptiles, they have 4 legs and they lay eggs with leathery shells. Don't forget that crocodile, for example, have dry scales. Birds, very important hint, guys. If there is a table or they asked you to list the characteristics of birds, you have to say that the body covered with feathers, but legs have what? Legs have scales. Only their legs. Only their legs. Mammals, I think it's easy to know the characteristics of mammals. They have mammary glands to feed their youngs or to suckle their youngs with milk. They have 4 limbs and they have hair and external ear or ear pin. The body covered with hair or fur. So it's easy to know the characteristics of mammals. There is a specific question called dichotomous key, and this dichotomous key is the is used to identify and classify organisms. All what I want you to do is to follow the scheme in the exam that the examiner provides you with. So all what I want you to do is to follow step by step. Let's go to step 1. If scales are present, go to 2. So just follow this. From 1, we will go to 2. If fins present, so the organism called tilapia, and if not, water monitor. If scales absent, so we will go to 3. If the skin is moist, so this is a frog. If it has dry skin or the animal has dry skin, we will go to 4. 4, feathers are present, so it's pigeon. And if not, we will go to 5. In 5, if horns present, so it's a goat. If not, this is a leopard cat. So usually, and to be honest, the dichotomous key will not be that easy, but it's not that hard, because all what I want you to do is to follow the scheme that you have, or to focus on the characteristics that all of the figures and diagrams represent in the question. Okay? Can we construct a key? Yes, we can construct a key based on the observable features of organisms. So you will check, if he asked you to construct a key, you will check all of the characteristics that you have, and how could you write the characteristics in your question, and we will practice on this. Before going to topic 2, I want to tell you that very important to know that we used DNA to differentiate between living organisms, and we realized that some living organisms shared a common ancestor because we found some genetic bases are exactly the same. And it is extremely important to know this. We are using anatomy or structure such as what we mentioned in the presentation. We are using DNA, and it is way professional and way accurate, because if we are talking about DNA, khalas, everything will be clear. We are studying the genetic material of an organism. Now, this is a mind map to what we covered during the topic 1 explanation session. If you have any problem of any kind, please let me know.